Welcome back. We're talking about the bombings at the Boston Marathon that took place a year ago. Federal prosecutors say two ethnic Chechen brothers planted bombs at the finish line. It was 2 years earlier when Russian officials reportedly told the FBI that the oldest brother, Tamerlan Tsarnaev, was, quote, a follower of radical Islam and a strong believer. But according to reports released this week, the Russian government failed to share that information, that he allegedly discussed Islamic jihad with his mother. Ever since the 9/11 attacks, there has been growing anti-Islamic sentiment in the United States. But the larger question is, why has the United States become a target of Muslim extremists? Well, joining me now to discuss the issue from Toronto is author, columnist, talk show radio host Tarek Fatah. His books include Chasing a Mirage, The Tragic Illusion of an Islamic State, and The Jew is Not My Enemy. And with me here in Washington is Corey Saylor. He's the director of the Department to Monitor and Combat Islamophobia with the Council of American-Islamic Relations. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
And Tarek, let me start with you. You are Muslim, and I'm going to start off with something from your online profile. You say Muslims are a society, and I'm going to quote here, lost in the sands of Sinai with no Moses to lead us out, held hostage by hateful pretenders of piety. That's a pretty strong indictment, isn't it?
Well, the evidence is right there. For the last about 50 years, or more so after the end of the Cold War, are we not hostages? Whether it is in Xinjiang or whether it is in South Africa, India, whether it is in Syria, whether the turmoil that is taking place in the Central African Republic or in Nigeria, United States, Canada, Spain, everywhere it is our leadership that has failed us. And the Central African Republic turmoil is evidence of what can go wrong, where an entire country is being ethnically cleansed by Muslims, not for their own fault, but for the fault of the leaders who brought in the Seleka rebels and started attacking Christians. So the notion of establishing a worldwide caliphate, the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, funded by Saudi Arabia and on a private as well as government level, has led us into this mess, with no separation of concept of separation of religion and state ever being propagated by the leadership in the traditional leadership in the Muslim community. We are left in the sands of Sinai.
Okay, let me ask Corey for his response to that.
So, absolutely true that since the end of the colonial period, there has been some chaos in the Muslim world, but to say that we're lost in the sands of Sinai completely misrepresents. You have a number of countries that you don't hear about in the news regularly because there's simply nothing of interest to the world's news corps going on in those countries. And then you have a lot of areas where there are significant advances, such as Tunisia, which after its revolution has passed a new constitution, is doing well and is moving forward. So you have to give those countries credit. But to talk about the notion of Muslims looking to reestablish a worldwide caliphate is really looking at the talking points of the violent extremists. Nobody has been trying to really establish a caliphate since the one under the Ottoman Empire fell. Everyone recognizes that today the world is made up of nation states, that those states contain within them sometimes majority Muslim, sometimes minority Muslim. But each of those states is created to try for the betterment of the people living within it, not to try to establish some one worldwide global domination.
Corey, how
But you can't do that unless, the point being that you can't do that unless and until you renounce the doctrine of Sharia, the man-made, man-written laws of the 8th, 9th century that have become part and parcel of the discourse by the traditional mosque leadership and the traditional Muslim organizations. They dare not ever renounce the notion of jihad.
So the basic doctrine of Sharia is be a benefit to mankind and prevent harm from coming to mankind, which is essentially what we're trying to do here in the United States. We try to form a more perfect union. So to say that Muslims have to renounce something that's basic, core to their faith, is essentially asking Catholics to give up on canon law.
Let me get to one very real problem, Corey, that you face here in the United States, and that is, how concerned are you that many people, and the media for that matter here in the United States, tend to generalize? I mean, here you have two men who've been implicated in this bombing, the Boston Marathon bombing. Immediately a label was attached, Islamic terrorism, and before you know it, every Muslim seemed to be tarred with the same brush.
Well, I mean, we recognize that we didn't do a very good job before 9/11 of introducing our faith to people. So that on 9/11, most people were introduced to our faith watching airplanes slam into buildings. And that's on our shoulders to show people that the reality of our faith is completely different than the distortion of Al-Qaeda and their ideological allies. On the other hand, there has emerged in the United States a network of people who benefit from smearing the other. And this, unfortunately, is nothing new in the United States. So the most relevant example is Japanese Americans. After Pearl Harbor, an attack on our country, loyal Japanese Americans were blamed for that. They were placed in internment camps. But they gave us an example. They stood up, they used the Constitution to push back, they reminded America about its own ideals. Right. It took them 40 years, and they got the United States government to recognize what was done to them was wrong.
Okay, Tarek, what do you make of that, the fact that the reality of what Muslims really stand up for has been distorted by extremist elements?
That's simply not true. I don't know where my friend is coming from. Muhammad Ali was the most popular man in the United States of America. He was a Muslim. Malcolm X was a Muslim long before any of these Arab or Pakistani-based organizations that came forward preaching the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States. They're the ones who put us into this trouble. Nobody ever told Muhammad Ali that we don't like you because you're a Muslim. He is a practicing Muslim. Malcolm X stood up for the rights of the black people as an observant Muslim. Nobody ever talked against Islam over there. You think Fareed Zakaria faces discrimination? You think Khalid Hosseini's books, bestsellers for 3-5 years?
I think the stereotypes of Muslims that have existed in the United States have been there for a long time. The decline in Islam's reputation in the United States started around about the time of the Iranian Revolution.
Okay, wait, I just don't want to...
Let me finish my point, sir.
Talking of each other.
Let me finish my point. Let me finish my point. The problem is that today, the traditional leadership of the Muslim community in the United States has never once staged a demonstration outside the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's consulates. They've never once come out and said that the people being hanged to death in Pakistan and Iran and in Saudi Arabia, the homophobia, the racism against black people in Islamic countries, what is happening in Syria is not some Jewish conspiracy of the Americans killing Muslims. These are Arabs killing Arabs. And talking about stable Islamic countries, please. I mean, you can always fool ignorant or gullible white liberals. You can't fool us who are victims of Islamic terrorism within the countries. That is why we fled and came here.
Right, okay, Tarek, you made your point. You made your point. Let me ask Corey to respond to that.
So the notion that you can always fool white liberals is, I mean, that's just an unfortunate point to make. I believe that most people are very intelligent and given the facts can make reasonable decisions. So I don't know that anybody's out to fool anyone or that we can call the American people gullible, to be frank. If you look at Muslim organizations in this country, they have condemned consistently errant practices in other Muslim countries. But at the end of the day, I'm not responsible for the choices that Saudi Arabia makes. I can criticize how they choose to implement my faith, and I certainly do at times. But I'm just as responsible for that as a Christian is for what's being done in the name of Christianity sometimes in South Sudan. I think what we have to do is look at the faith as a whole. What does the faith as a whole teach its followers to do? Which is to be a benefit to humanity, to prevent harm from humanity. The people that are involved in violent extremism are an aberration of that. And we all have to figure out how can we use both our American ideals and our Islamic ideals to make sure those people are taken off center stage and removed from the ability to harm people.
Okay, Tarek, let me ask you this. There have been a number of surveys done about the deep dissatisfaction among Muslim youth, especially in the Middle East, because of the dictatorship under which they live, etc. But why is America targeted by extremists in this way? And we hear it, you know, more than once. We hear it all the time.
I think the number one reason is that the United States of America is symbolic of the issues of gender equality, of the issues of gay marriage, the issues of black and white equality, the issues that rulers of states and governments can be removed, that laws do not come from inherited texts, laws come from Congress and Parliament, and this is what is fundamentally hostile to the Islamists. I have been old enough to recognize and witness how President Eisenhower went through the streets of Karachi in Pakistan in an open car with tens of thousands of people welcoming him.
Tarek, let me stop you. Tarek, let me just stop you there for a minute and ask you a question. Are you saying that democracy and the teachings of Islam are incompatible with each other?
I am saying that unless and until there's gender equality and the end of racism in the Arab world against black people and people of my color, which is brown-skinned people, where Sharia law determines that if I consider myself equal to an Arab...
States still. I mean, it's been going on since the beginning of the founding of the United States.
Okay, just one moment. Tarek, go ahead.
You won't let me speak. This is not a mosque, sir. As long as the practice of Sharia says that a brown or a black-skinned person is not equal to an Arab and it's a sin, and while this is hidden from the rest of the people, while simply lip service is being done to that, we know what the conditions are in the Arab world of black and brown people. You cannot have democracy if men and women are not equal, and black and brown or white and Arab are not equal.
Okay.
I cannot be the citizen of any Islamic country other than Canada or the United States.
All right, we need to take a break right now. We'll be back with more of our conversation when the heat continues. Stay with us.